Heidi Bellato, host of Charlotte Living's Culinary Online, and today we're cooking local with local carrots. The great thing about shopping from farmers markets is that farmers grow things all year long, so you don't have to wait until the spring or the summer. We got local carrots from Coldwater Creek Farms here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they are beautiful and they're so sweet and delicious. So we got them right before the big frost, the first big frost of winter, and that's what helps to make them so sweet. So what I've done with the local carrots is just cut them off right at the stem and then cut them into small pieces. I rinsed them off, but I didn't peel them because they're so fresh. They were just picked 2 days ago. So they're so fresh that we don't want to peel half of them away. Just rinse them off and you're fine. Then I took those carrots, I put them in a pot with a little bit of butter and let the butter get hot and sizzling, then added the carrots, and you let the carrots cook until they caramelize. So they start to turn brown. The heat and the fat pull out the natural sugars of the carrots. That's the beginning for our carrot soup that we're making. Next step is a local squash. This is local butternut squash, also from Coldwater Creek Farms. And I've cut it in half. Now you'll notice that my two halves of squash look a little bit different. This one's not cooked yet and this one's already been cooked, but I want to tell you what I did. Cut the squash in half. The hardest thing about winter squash is cutting them, but if you buy local product, it's much easier to cut because the longer a squash is stored, the thicker its skin gets and the harder it is to cut. These we just cut right in half. We left the seeds intact and then took a cookie sheet, just a regular baking sheet, and lined it with a piece of parchment paper. The parchment paper is going to help to keep the squash from sticking to the sheet. Then take your cut piece of squash, turn it upside down, and you're going to put it right on your parchment paper. That goes in a 375-degree oven for about 30 minutes or so until the outside of the squash starts to brown and caramelize. Again, the heat is pulling the natural sugars out of the vegetable and it's making it caramelize. When you pull it out of the oven, it's all brown, and when I turned it upside down, you can see that our squash is beautifully cooked and tender. Now, all we need to do is scoop this out, put it into the pot with the carrots, and we're well on our way to a fabulous soup. So what we're going to do first is just cut away the little seed pod that we had. The rest of it's a much easier way to remove the seeds from a winter squash. You can do this with pumpkin too at Halloween time. Now, the rest of it's excellent eating. You could take it and puree it, mash it up just like mashed potatoes. Or here's our pot where our carrots have been cooking. They are beautifully caramelized, and we're going to take our squash and just put it right in. Spoon it all in there. Now for this recipe and the recipe that you'll see online, we've used a couple pounds of carrots and a whole butternut squash. You can also do it with acorn squash, you can do it with pumpkin, you can do it with any kind of winter squash. If it's summer or spring and you don't have a winter squash on hand, don't worry about it, just do it with the carrots, or maybe add a parsnip or two. Or you could add some potatoes or some cauliflower. All of that works great. Now that we've got the squash in there, we're going to add to the pan some broth. This is a vegetable broth that I'm adding, but you could add chicken broth if you wanted to. I like to use vegetable broths when I'm working with fresh, delicious tasting vegetables, or sometimes just water. You don't need the extra flavor of the broth. This goes back on the stove. We're going to let it come to a boil and then simmer till the carrots are tender. So we've got it all right there and ready to go over to our stove. So I think our carrots are cooked now. The squash is certainly cooked. It's all come to a boil. It smells wonderful. So we're going to bring it back over to the counter and I'm going to show you how you serve. Somebody asked me about my soup pot earlier in our production crew. It's actually an asparagus steamer, but I love it for making little batches of soup, just like a stock pot. You can use any kind of pot that you want, a saucepan. It just depends upon the quantity you're doing. In our pot, we've got the stock, which is boiled, the squash, and the carrots. We're going to season it with a little bit of a mix of salt, gray Celtic sea salt, and some pepper. I just blended them together. So we'll sprinkle that right in. We're also going to add a little bit of heavy cream. You can leave this step out if you want to, but I think it makes the soup really rich and taste delicious. And now we're going to puree the chunks of carrots and the pieces of squash, and we're going to use this little gadget. This is an immersion blender, sort of like a food processor on a stick. So we'll put it in. Now what you need to remember is while it's running, don't pull it out because you'll have soup everywhere. So put it in the pot and just let it run. And you can puree the whole mix. Once it's all smooth, take your immersion blender out. If you're looking to buy an immersion blender, get one that does this. It comes apart. So this part, the electrical part, stays away from water, and this part you can just take and put right in your sink. Now I'm going to take a ladle and ladle up a big bowl of this wonderful puree of carrot and butternut squash soup right into the bowl. You could add a little bit more cream if you wanted to do that, but I think it looks fabulous. And the really cool thing about this soup now is that it's delicious hot or cold. So you could take it to a summer concert if you wanted to do that. You could serve it in the middle of winter or fall. It's a very versatile recipe without a lot of fat, save for the heavy cream. And if you wanted to cut that back, you could actually use a fat-free non-dairy creamer, liquid creamer, and pour that in, and it'll work just like you were creaming your coffee. Now we're going to top this with some local microgreens. Oh, that looks beautiful. These are from Tega Hill Farms in Fort Mill. They're local microgreens, which means it's a teeny tiny version of whatever kind of herb or vegetable. There's arugula in there, some bull's blood, lots of different things, and they have a fabulous flavor and a beautiful look. So there's our butternut squash soup. Hope you enjoy it.